My name is Jonah Whitaker. I'm 33 years old, and I live in a small, weathered ranch-style house just off Route 6, outside the sleepy town of Dry Hollow, Colorado. I work as a systems technician for a regional logistics company called Arden Transit. Been at it nearly 5 years now. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. Good hours, fair pay, and a solid benefits package. Most days, I'm grateful for the simplicity. I drive a red 2012 Tacoma with 180,000 miles on it and a dent on the driver's side door I stopped caring about 2 years ago. My mortgage is halfway paid off, my backyard's overrun with weeds I keep promising myself I'll deal with, and my evenings usually end with either a podcast or an old rock vinyl spinning on my dad's hand-me-down turntable. That's my pace. Quiet, predictable, safe. Relationships? I've had a few. Mostly short-lived, most ending before they got complicated. I guess I'm not the easiest guy to crack open. I listen more than I speak. I fix things better than I explain them. Doesn't mean I'm closed off, just cautious. That's the word. Cautious. Anyway, this story doesn't start with anything dramatic. No lightning bolt, no sudden realization. Just a Friday morning at the office, same as 100 others. I rolled in early like I always do, 7:45 sharp. I can't stand rushing. I like settling in before the day ticks off. Our office isn't anything special. An old converted insurance building with flickering fluorescents and carpets that haven't been updated since Bush was in office. Still, it works. It's home, in a weird way. I grabbed a cup of coffee from the machine in the break room, a watery brew that somehow manages to taste burnt and bland at the same time, and claimed my usual seat at the table in the back corner of the bullpen, near the window. Good view of the parking lot, bad Wi-Fi signal. I didn't care. Routine mattered more. At 9 a.m., our weekly Friday meeting was about to start. We all waited for our operations director, the person who ran the place with unnerving precision, Delaney Shore. If Arden Transit was a body, she was the spine, rigid, unbending, and essential. She walked in right on schedule, 9 a.m., clutching her tablet in one hand and her phone in the other. Light tan pantsuit, beige heels, her auburn hair tied into a sleek twist that never had a strand out of place. She always looked like she could step into a boardroom or a battlefield without missing a beat. "Morning," she said, setting her phone face down on the table. We murmured a response, half asleep, half alert. The meeting was the usual. Delivery audits, scheduling glitches, maintenance issues, upcoming software patches. She rattled off numbers like they were breathing exercises. I took notes where I needed to, nodded along. Nothing unusual, until the end. Before we wrapped, Delaney looked up from her tablet and said, "One last thing. Anyone available this evening to help me out with something at home? Just mounting a couple shelves and relocating a television. Nothing too heavy. I'll compensate for your time." There was that pause, the kind that always hangs in the air when no one wants to say yes, but everyone feels guilty saying no. People shifted in their seats, avoided eye contact. I cleared my throat and raised my hand. "I can do it," I said, "as long as it's not too late." Delaney met my gaze for a beat longer than usual. "Perfect. After 6 works?" "Yeah," I nodded. "Should be fine." She offered the smallest nod, then turned back to her notes. "Meeting adjourned." Nobody said much after that. Normally, something like that would have triggered at least a few smart remarks from the crew. Jokes about Jonah getting cozy with the brass, or offers to come supervise. But this time, nothing. Maybe because it was Delaney. She didn't exactly invite teasing. She didn't invite much of anything. The rest of the day went by in a blur of cable checks and system resets. I had lunch at my desk, some leftover chili and a cold slice of cornbread, and spent the second half of the afternoon checking diagnostics for a satellite office in Alamosa. It was a typical day. By 5:30, I was packed up and heading out. My toolbox rode shotgun. Her address was only a few miles away, Wisteria Ridge. That kind of upscale development tucked behind oak-lined streets and perfectly spaced lantern posts. Nothing extravagant, just expensive enough to keep things quiet. I pulled into her driveway at 6:08, cut the engine, and sat for a moment. Not sure why. I wasn't nervous, not exactly. just aware that this wasn't a normal evening. I got out, grabbed my toolbox, and walked to the door. Before I could knock, it opened. Delaney stood there. But not the Delaney from work. Gone were the heels and the crisp blazer. She wore a loose, dark blue sweatshirt and black yoga pants. No makeup. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves past her shoulders. She always looked like she could step into a boardroom or a battlefield without missing a beat. "Hey," she said, "right on time." "Hey," I replied. "I hope I'm not interrupting dinner or anything." "Not at all. Come in." I stepped inside. Her home was spotless, modern, minimalist, but not cold. Framed prints on the walls, a soft rug underfoot, and a subtle smell of citrus in the air. In the living room, 3 shelf brackets were already taped to the wall with blue painter's tape. The TV sat on a low stand beneath it, still plugged in. "Shelves go there," she said, pointing, "and I want the TV mounted just above. I marked the studs already." "Nice prep work," I said, setting my toolbox down. She shrugged. "I've been thinking about doing it for months, just never got around to it." I got to work. She sat on the couch behind me, half watching a home cooking show with the volume low. Occasionally, she'd ask about height preferences or wire concealment. Mostly, we worked in silence. Comfortable silence. "You want something to drink?" she asked at one point. "Water's good." She laughed lightly. "Most people say beer." "I'm driving." "Responsible," she said, handing me a glass. Her fingers brushed mine. Nothing dramatic, just real. It took about an hour and a half total. Mounting the shelves was easy enough. The TV bracket was trickier, but I've done worse. When I was finished, I packed up my tools and turned to find her standing in the hallway with a white envelope in her hand. "Here," she said, extending it toward me. I shook my head. "No charge, seriously." She hesitated. "Well, in that case, what are you doing this weekend?" That caught me off guard. I blinked. "This weekend?" "Yeah," she said, like it was no big deal. "You got plans?" I thought about it. "Just fixing up the fence. Maybe clean the gutters?" She tilted her head. "Want to hang out instead? Nothing weird. I get bored on weekends." There was no flirt in her voice. No edge. Just honesty. I nodded. "Sure, why not?" "Cool. Saturday, late morning." Saturday morning rolled in slow and gray. One of those moody Colorado skies that feels like it might rain, but never quite commits. I woke up before my alarm, even though I didn't set one. Old habits. The house was quiet. I made coffee, stared at the steam rising from the mug while sitting on my back porch, boots on the railing, a faded Carhartt jacket wrapped around my shoulders. I wasn't anxious, not really, but something about the day felt different. Like I was waiting for a second shoe to drop, even though I couldn't tell you what the first one was. By 9:45, I was showered, clean-shaven, and staring into my closet like it was a math problem. I settled on jeans and a soft plaid shirt. Not new, but not paint-stained either. I tossed a flannel-lined jacket in the back seat of the truck, just in case the clouds followed me. At 10:28, I pulled into her driveway. Same as last night, the front porch light was still on, even in daylight. Before I could knock, the door opened. Again. Delaney stood barefoot, in black leggings and an oversized navy hoodie. Her hair was half damp, hanging loose around her collarbones. She looked rested. Real. "You're early," she said, smiling slightly. "I respect that." "I respect coffee," I replied, holding up a tray with 2 cups from Copperhouse Cafe. She laughed and stepped aside. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and clean linen. A candle burned low on the kitchen counter. There was no TV, no music, just the soft hum of the fridge and the clink of her mug on the marble counter as she took a sip. We sat at her kitchen island, facing each other. She looked at me over the rim of her cup. "You ever get tired of being alone?" she asked. Not accusatory, just curious. I thought about that. Sometimes. But then I remind myself it's better than being with the wrong person. She nodded slowly. "That's fair." 10 minutes later, she grabbed a set of car keys off the hook and said, "Let's go somewhere. I know a spot." I offered to drive. She insisted. "Yesterday was your guest day. Today, it's mine." Her SUV was a charcoal gray Volvo, clean inside and out. She drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely near the gear shift. The windows were cracked, letting in the fresh, cold breeze that hinted at rain but never quite delivered. Acoustic music played low. Ray LaMontagne, Bon Iver. Nothing loud, nothing distracting. We drove north, past the edge of town, then farther still, where the roads narrowed and the trees thickened. Eventually, we pulled into a small nature preserve I didn't even know existed. A modest lake sat nestled in a cradle of pines, with a looping gravel trail and a scattering of benches. "This is where I come when things feel too loud," she said, locking the car and tucking her hands in her hoodie. We walked the path slowly, not touching, not close enough to make it look like anything, but still moving in sync. She told me how she found the place during the collapse of her marriage, how she would come here, park, and just breathe. It felt like everything was slipping: business, home, identity. This was the one place I could just exist. "You seem different now," I said. "Stronger." She smiled faintly. "I am, but that doesn't mean I don't get lonely." We reached a bench near the edge of the lake. She kicked off her shoes, pulled her knees up and rested her chin on them. I sat beside her, one arm stretched across the back of the bench, not touching, just there. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. "Leaving what?" "This town, the job, starting over somewhere new." I let the question sit for a minute. Then, "Sometimes. But I think some of us aren't meant to chase the horizon. Some of us just want to build something solid where we are." She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Maybe admiration, maybe recognition. Or maybe, she said quietly, "You're just braver than most people give you credit for." We stayed at the park until the clouds thinned and light began filtering through the trees. On the way back, we stopped at a roadside produce stand. She picked up homemade peach jam and handed me a jar with a mischievous grin. "You ever try this?" "Can't say I have." "It's awful. But somehow I can't stop eating it." "Sold," I said. Back at her house, she laid out bread, pesto, a wedge of cheese, and a bottle of cider. We built simple open-faced sandwiches and sat on her porch to eat. The sky turned that soft, late-afternoon gold that makes everything look like it matters more than it does. We didn't talk about work, not once. Afterward, she disappeared into a hallway and came back holding a dusty fleece blanket and a beat-up box of old DVDs. "Dealer's choice," she said. I picked a movie at random. "Good Will Hunting." "Classic," she nodded. We curled up on the couch. She handed me a throw pillow, then slowly leaned against me. No hesitation this time. Just trust. Halfway through the film, her head found my chest. I didn't move. I just listened to the movie and the quiet of her breathing, steady and soft. By the time credits rolled, it was close to midnight again. "I should head out," I said quietly. She stood with me, walked me to the door. The porch light flickered, her arms folded loosely across her hoodie. She didn't say thank you, just, "Don't pretend this was nothing." I met her eyes. "I won't." Sunday morning arrived with a kind of stillness that wrapped around the house like a thick blanket. No alarm buzzed, no barking dogs down the street, just light filtering through the half-open blinds and the faint creak of the baseboard as the old furnace kicked on. I lay there longer than usual, not out of laziness, but because I was full. Not from food or rest, just that rare kind of fullness that comes after something good, something quiet and real. The kind of thing that's hard to explain to anyone else without sounding like you're making too much of it. I eventually got up, brewed a fresh pot of coffee, and made scrambled eggs with toast. I was halfway through eating when my phone buzzed. "Delaney, fire pit's clean. You around?" That was it. No emoji, no explanation. But the message made me smile before I even realized I was smiling. I texted back, "Me. Give me 20. I'm bringing marshmallows." I threw on the same jeans from yesterday, a clean Henley, and my jacket from the back seat. I checked the pantry, half a bag of marshmallows, still sealed, good enough. Tossed it in a tote bag with a couple skewers I had tucked in a drawer, and hit the road. When I pulled up to her house, she was already outside, dragging a rake across a small patch of leaves in the backyard. Hair in a messy bun, hoodie half-zipped over a tank top, joggers tucked into thick socks. "Morning," I called. She leaned on the rake. "Perfect timing. I just finished pretending I know what I'm doing." I laughed and walked up to her. "You're faking it well." She waved me toward the fire pit. It was neatly cleaned out, fresh logs stacked in a small pyramid. 2 mugs waited on the patio table, steam rising in the cool air. "Coffee's stronger today. You'll like it," she said. We sat with our mugs, wrapped in fleece blankets she'd brought out. No music, no traffic, just the snap of the fire starting to take and the occasional bird flitting across the fence line. We didn't talk for a while, didn't need to. Eventually she exhaled long and slow. I forgot how good it feels to just sit, to not have to be on for anyone. "You don't get much of that?" She shook her head. "Not really. I used to think I liked silence, but I think what I really liked was the idea of silence, the kind you get when someone's sitting next to you and you don't have to fill it." "This is good silence," I said. She looked over at me, one corner of her mouth twitching up. "Exactly." By noon we were headed into town for the farmer's market. She wore sunglasses and a beige wool coat, her hair falling loosely down her back. She looked more like a traveler than a local, a woman you might see in a coffee table book titled Sundays in Small Towns. The market was buzzing with quiet energy. Kids with face paint, people bundled in layers, stalls lined with fresh bread, apples, honey, and candles. She moved through it like she belonged but didn't need to be noticed. A few vendors waved or nodded, but no one stopped her. She stuck close to me, not touching, but aligned. At one booth, an older woman selling pies leaned over the table and said, "You two make a lovely couple." She just smiled. I cleared my throat and muttered, "Thanks," but neither of us corrected her. Back at her place, we unpacked our market haul. Sourdough, a jar of tomato jam, and something called smoky maple salt that I'm still not convinced was real food. We made open-face sandwiches, poured cold sodas, and ate at the kitchen island. She had her bare feet up on the stool rung, ankles crossed, like we'd done this 100 times. After lunch, she disappeared down the hall and returned with a faded quilt and an old trivia game box. "Game or nap?" she asked. I raised an eyebrow. "You asking the guy who brought marshmallows to a fire pit?" She smiled. "Game it is." We set up in the living room, cross-legged on the rug. The game was clearly from the early 2000s. Half the questions were about old movies or pop culture references that hadn't aged well. The plastic pieces didn't fit anymore and the board was bent in the middle. But we didn't care. We played for over an hour, getting half the questions wrong, laughing when we guessed ridiculously off answers. I found myself watching her in between rounds, the way she furrowed her brow when she thought hard, the way her nose scrunched up when she laughed too hard, the way she always traced the edge of the question card when it was my turn to read. Eventually, she laid back on the carpet and sighed, arms above her head, blanket bunched under her knees. "This is the part where things get complicated, right?" I turned my head to look at her. "Doesn't have to be." She smiled, eyes soft. "No, I guess it doesn't." She sat up and stretched. "Come on, one last thing." We went outside. She lit the fire pit again, this time with a practiced flick of the lighter. I pulled the marshmallows from my jacket. "You really did bring them," she laughed. "I come prepared," I said. We roasted them slowly, not rushed. Took our time. She sipped warm cider from a metal camping mug, the kind that looked like it had stories to tell. We talked about music, childhood Halloween costumes, the dumbest things we ever believed as kids. The sun dipped lower, turning the clouds pink and lavender. Then, quietly, like it was the most natural thing in the world, she said, "You want to stay for dinner again?" I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't want to misread it. She saw that in my face and added, "I mean, it feels like you should." So I did. We made pasta again, garlic, olive oil, and a sprinkle of that weird maple salt just to try it. She put on jazz this time, soft, scratchy vintage stuff. We ate slower than we needed to, the kind of pace that invites real conversation. After dinner, she curled up on the couch. She leaned fully into me this time, head on my chest, knees tucked in, one arm across my stomach. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. At one point, she whispered, "I can't remember the last time I had a weekend like this." I didn't know what to say, so I just tightened the blanket around her and replied, "Me neither." Monday came in hard. No clouds, no fire pits, no coffee on a porch, just the grind of alarm clocks, stiff collars, and traffic lights that always seemed to turn red the second you started hoping they wouldn't. I woke up feeling like I'd dreamed the whole weekend, but the scent of her blanket still clung faintly to my jacket, and my phone still had her Sunday morning text, so I knew it was real, and that made everything more complicated. I shaved, pressed a shirt I didn't usually bother to iron, not to impress, just to feel like I had control of something. I wanted to walk into work and look normal, like nothing had changed, even though everything had. At 7:57, I pulled into the lot. Same spot, same routine. But when I walked through the glass doors, the air felt different. The lights looked harsher. The hallway buzzed louder. And suddenly, every footstep, every glance felt like it meant more than it used to. I took my usual seat in the tech bay and pretended to check emails. I didn't see Delaney right away, but I knew she'd be on time. She was always on time. At 8:12, I heard them, her heels, sharp against the polished floor. She walked in like always, blazer tailored, tablet in one hand, coffee in the other. Hair back in a sleek twist, the Delaney everyone else knew, the one who ran meetings and crushed budgets and never looked back once she walked away from a conversation. Our eyes met for a single second. She gave a nod. That was it. No smile, no flicker of recognition, just professionalism, pure and clean. I got it. We had silently agreed on this. Compartmentalization. Whatever happened over the weekend belonged to that space. This was work. This was public. And I was okay with that. At least I told myself I was. The day dragged like molasses. I buried myself in router logs and remote patch updates, rotating between field calls and support tickets. She passed through the department once, mid-afternoon, to check on a new install. She spoke to 2 supervisors, never glanced in my direction. She didn't need to. She was playing it safe. So was I. By 5:02, I was in my truck. Key turned halfway, engine not yet running. I just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, feeling like I was in a different vehicle than the one that had carried me to her fire pit. The dashboard was the same. The faint scent of marshmallow still lingered. But everything else felt hollow. That night, I didn't text her. She didn't text me. Same with Tuesday. And again on Wednesday. By Thursday, I started rewriting the narrative in my head. Maybe it had just been comfort. A good weekend. Maybe we were 2 quiet people who stumbled into something peaceful but unsustainable. Maybe that was all it ever was meant to be. I tried to believe that. I really did. But I couldn't. Because even in silence, her presence lingered. In the coffee aisle when I passed her favorite brand. In the half-finished jar of peach jam I never really liked. In the way I instinctively checked my phone every hour, waiting for nothing in particular. And then, on Friday, 1 week since it all began, it shifted again. I was mid-install on a firewall update at a client site when a Slack notification buzzed on my phone. Delaney, are you free at lunch? I read the message twice. Typed yes, deleted it, then typed it again and hit send. She replied immediately. Delaney, conference room B1, 12:15. At 12:13, I walked in. The room was empty. One long table, blinds closed, Air too cold, like always. I sat near the end, palms sweating, fighting the urge to guess what any of this meant. 2 minutes later, she stepped in. No coffee, no tablet, no blazer. Just her. Simple blouse, hair tied back in a loose bun. She looked unsure. I'd never seen her unsure. She shut the door and stood for a second, then let out a breath. The kind of breath people take when they've been carrying something heavy too long. I've been overthinking this all week, trying to figure out how to be smart, how to be fair, how to handle this the right way. I didn't speak. I could see she needed to. She continued, "I liked being with you last weekend. More than I expected to. And when Monday hit, I panicked. I've never done that before, spent time with someone from work. It felt like crossing some invisible line, and I didn't know how to react. So I defaulted to control." She looked at me then, full eye contact. "But I don't want to pretend it didn't happen. I don't want to erase it like it was some misstep." I sat quietly, letting it land. She said, "I don't have a plan. I'm not offering a timeline or a definition. I just know I want to see you again. Outside of all this, away from the meetings and the ranks and the expectations, just us." I finally spoke. "I want that too." She looked like she might cry, but she didn't. She just nodded once, relieved, like the tension in her shoulders had been sitting there for days, waiting for permission to let go. And that was enough. That weekend, we drove to a small Italian place 2 towns over, neutral ground. No name tags, no company cars in the lot, just a table near a window, soft music, warm lighting. She wore jeans and a jacket, her hair down, loose waves. She looked free. We talked about old road trips, terrible first dates, our favorite meals as kids. She told me she used to dream of owning a bookstore cafe in Seattle. I told her I once planned to live out of a van and write fiction I never intended to publish. She leaned across the table at one point to wipe a dot of tomato sauce off my chin, and for the first time since I met her, she laughed in a way that sounded like it wasn't for anyone but herself. We didn't touch much that night, just a brush of fingers when she handed me the bill I wasn't allowed to pay. But something had changed. It wasn't a fling. It wasn't a phase. It was something steady and strange and new. And it felt like hours. Weeks passed like pages in a book you don't realize you've already read. Smooth, slow, meaningful in ways that didn't need explanation. Delaney and I kept things careful. At work, nothing changed. She remained the poised, sharp director everyone respected and feared in equal measure. I remained the tech guy in the back corner, the one who fixed things and kept his head down. We never lingered in conversation, never left meetings together. If people talked, we never heard it. Or maybe we just stopped caring if they did. Outside of work was different. We built a rhythm, deliberate, private. She'd stop by my place with a bottle of wine and a stack of groceries. I'd fix things around her house she hadn't gotten around to. Leaky faucet, creaky door, wobbly cabinet hinge. We never labeled what we were. That felt too big, too official. It was better like this. Real, grounded, simple. Some nights we cooked together with music low and shoes kicked off. Other nights we sat on her porch, under a blanket, trading stories over cider or coffee, depending on the season. There were no promises, no drama, just presence. And for me, that was more than enough. Months blurred into each other. Winter leaned into spring. The trees outside my house started blooming again. Her hair got a little longer. She started leaving her work heels by my door like it was normal. I started keeping a toothbrush in her bathroom and didn't feel strange about it. We didn't make a big deal of any of it. And then, one Thursday evening, after work, I was at her place fixing the leg on her coffee table. Same one I'd patched once before. The wood had splintered just enough to cause a wobble again. I had one hand steadying the underside when she spoke from the kitchen. "I hate that table," she said. I smiled without looking up. "Want me to build you a new one?" "No," she said simply. "I want you to live here." I froze for just a second, then tightened the bolt with one last twist and stood up. She was holding 2 glasses of wine, watching me. Not joking, not testing, just saying what she meant. I walked over, took 1 glass from her hand and said, "Okay." That was it. No speech, no proposal, no dramatic music, just a quiet decision between 2 people who'd spent enough time in silence to know when it mattered. We moved in together the next month. There was no announcement, no social post, no awkward dinner party explanation, just toothbrushes doubling up, toolboxes merging, mugs being shuffled from my cabinet to hers. My flannel shirts took up a quarter of her closet. Her half-finished novels started appearing on my nightstand. Life didn't become some cinematic montage. It became better. Some nights were quiet, some were long. Sometimes we argued over dumb things like laundry and where the spare keys should go. But none of it felt fragile. It felt durable, like we'd built something that could take a little weather. Every now and then, I'd catch her in the middle of something mundane, slicing an apple, feeding the dog, scribbling in a legal pad, and think, how did I end up here? Not in a panicked way, in a grateful one, because none of it was supposed to happen. She was my boss. I was just a field tech with good manners and steady hands. But a few shelves and a mounted television turned into dinner, and a quiet weekend turned into something like a home. Not a perfect story, just a real one. And it all started with a question, asked at the end of a meeting no one wanted to volunteer for. Does anyone happen to be free this evening?